folks, I'm out here at MoMBA today. Unfortunately, MoMBA is not open today, even though it's beautiful outside. But we're here to tell you about riding at MoMBA and when you can, when you can't. We'll give you some kind of tips and pointers about riding in the winter out here. First of all, I want to thank Subaru of America for all of their support. They support all of our outdoor recreation programs. Very generous and kind to us, and they've been working with us for quite a few years. And we thank them for continuing their support with us. So today out at MoMBA, like I said before, it is closed. And you know, this time of year, if you're a regular user out here at MoMBA, you're going to notice that it's closed a lot. That's not, you know, the biggest reason for that is that these trails are built sustainably, but they're not perfect. Too much rain, too much snow, different conditions are going to cause trails to get damaged if we allow it to be open and people come out here and ride. So we do have the ability to control this facility. Some of the reasons why we might keep the facility closed. One just happened a couple weeks ago. We had some pretty significant winds over a couple of days, and we had about 25 trees come down. Various sized trees, some of them blocked, you know, a 10 or 15 foot section of trail. So that might be a reason why the park stays closed for a longer portion of time. In the winter, you know, anymore we're not getting really big snows and long deep freezes. So in the winter, you know, sometimes we get just enough snow that it melts and freezes and melts and freezes, and our parking lot here turns to a big ice skating rink. And unfortunately, the parking lot here is gravel, so it makes for a difficult time to come out. We can't really salt it, we can't really plow it to keep it clear. So that might be a reason why the park stays closed. In the winter, more often than not anymore, we get muddy trails, and you can see right here, Jordan and I are out here today. We were just checking out the trails a little bit, and you know, everything else is covered in snow. It seems like it's nice and cold, but we have, you know, pretty significant mud. It's just not cold enough. We're right at that freezing point. So unfortunately, the trails are, you know, going to get really muddy if we were to stay out here and ride all day. The big reason, though, and this is the one that I think most people don't fully understand, and we talk about it and we get questions about this all the time, is freeze-thaw. Freeze-thaw is the process of the ground freezing and thawing as the day warms, and this happens in the winter, especially in Ohio anymore. Once we do get into kind of the heart of winter, it's almost a daily thing. You know, if temperatures are staying 20 degrees or colder, that ground never really warms up to the point where it thaws out. And when it thaws is when the damage happens. When we get days like today where it's hovering right around 30 degrees, and especially early in the season like it is now, the ground really hasn't had a chance to get a good solid hard freeze. So we get situations like this where everything else is frozen, there's snow on the ground, it looks like it's plenty cold enough, but however, you look down and we've got a muddy mess here. So a couple things to kind of keep in mind is, number one, you can keep track of what's going on and kind of start to learn when the trails are going to be open, when they're going to be closed, based on the weather forecast. If you know it's going to be, you know, 20 degrees or colder for weeks on end, there's a really good chance that we'll be able to get this place open. If it's still hovering on that 30-degree mark, which is more often what we get, then it's a really good chance that it's not. Once it warms up even a little bit more where the ground can't freeze, you know, that's when the trail really gets destroyed if we keep it open. So something a little bit more specific about the freeze-thaw is that kind of the science behind it is that, you know, the ground gets saturated with moisture. And in the winter when it freezes solid, places like Minnesota or up in northern Michigan, that ground stays completely solid for almost the entire winter. It doesn't have a chance for it to thaw out. Once it starts to warm up, the ground starts to thaw, and that compacted soil that we work so hard to make a really good solid tread for our trails starts to kind of crumble. And if we ride on trails when it's in that crumbling phase, even if it seems like it's really dry, it just destroys the tread surface, and then it takes a lot of time to repair that. And what ultimately ends up happening is we actually get muddy spots. So it may not seem like you're causing any damage at first, but it's really after the fact that once the ground does get that moisture content starts to kind of thaw out a little bit more, and it turns into mud. We've all been on trails before where, you know, the mud's sticking to your feet or it's sticking to your tires, and there's ruts that are 3, 4, 5, 6 inches deep, and that's when that trail tread really starts to get destroyed. So keep an eye on the weather. That's a really telling sign. Our winters that we get around here, more often than not, it just doesn't stay cold enough to get a good solid freeze. It's hovering around that freeze thaw mark. So that's something that you can use to also gauge other trails as well. So like I said before, obviously MoMBA's closed today, but when it is open, there's some things that you want to keep in mind as well. There's going to be mud. This time of year, when the trails are open, there's going to be mud. And the best thing to do is to ride right through the mud. A lot of people, especially hiking trails, it seems like it happens more often than mountain bike trails, but you want to avoid the mud, is what a lot of people think they want to do, because they think that if there's mud, they're actually damaging the trail, or they don't want to get their big fancy bike dirty, and that's a whole other story. But if you're thinking that you're actually damaging the trail by riding around the mud, the reality is that you're taking that tread that's specifically designed to be in the 12 to 18 to 24 inch width, and when you ride around that mud, you're making that width wider and wider and wider, and you're starting to encroach onto the natural areas on either side of the trail. So you want to ride right through the middle. If the trails are open, those of us that manage these trails and make these decisions, we've made the conscious decision to say, yeah, it's okay, the amount of damage that could be caused is acceptable, so we're going to open the place, and you can ride right through the middle of the mud. You're going to get your bike a little muddy, but that's okay. Riding in the mud is kind of fun. Other things to consider when MoMBA is open, you want to come out and ride in the winter, is the time of day that you want to ride. So, early in the morning when the trails are still frozen is going to be a better time. As the day warms up, even when the trails are open and it's kind of teetering on that freeze-thaw cycle, you want to ride. If you want to ride and do the least amount of damage, ride early in the morning. Our trails here are open until 8 p.m. So, it gets dark in the winter, 5:30. Might want to come out here and ride at night. It's another great time to ride. And I'll talk a bit more about night riding in just a minute. But, the trail experience is a little bit different in the winter. If there's snow on the ground, you want to be mindful of what you're riding on. So, controlling your bike is a little bit different. It can be a little bit slippery. If it's really cold, there might be some pockets of ice and other things that you want to look out for. So if you're used to coming out here in the summer when it's bone dry and you take off ripping down the trail, you could probably do that again on a day like today if it was cold enough. But you might want to slow down a little bit until you get used to it if you've never done it before, because handling a bike in conditions like this is a little bit different. The other factor you have to contend with is leaves. So now all of our trees have lost the leaf coverage, and all that leaf litter is now on the trails. And early in the season, it gets really thick and builds up and starts to break down as the season goes on, but it can be really slippery. If you come around a corner and catch a bunch of wet leaves, it's really easy for your bike to just wash out from underneath. Let's see, what was the last thing I was going to mention about riding? Bottom line is just, take it slow at first to get comfortable, and relearn the trails with the current winter conditions. So the last thing I want to talk about is riding at night. And that's one of the cool things that winter allows us to do pretty easily, because it gets dark so early, is doing some really fun night riding. MoMBA closes at 8 p.m. over the winter, and that starts on November 1st and goes through March 31st. The rest of the year it's open until 10 p.m. So you can also do night riding in the summer, but in the winter it's a really cool experience, because especially days like this when you've got some snow coverage, it gets really quiet out here. But there's some other considerations to think of. First of all, you need some sort of light source. My favorite setup for a light is to actually use 2 lights. I like to have a light on my handlebars, and this is going to focus on the trail. It's going to, anywhere I turn my bars, the light is going to move with it. Now, when I'm also riding, my head is on a swivel, so I'm moving my head a lot more and moving and looking around and so that makes me want to also have one on my helmet. So 2 lights, one on the helmet, one on the handlebars. This is what works best for me. This is actually one of my commuter bike lights, so it's a little bit low as far as the light goes. I think it's about 350 lumens. A lot of folks like to get up in the 700-800 range for a handlebar light. And for a helmet light, I think this one's maybe 250. And it's basically just kind of giving me enough light that when I'm looking around, I can still see. There's a couple tricks with riding at night too. If you've never ridden at night before, it's a whole different experience. Shadows really throw things off, so your depth perception can be a little bit off. So when you're riding really fast during the day, your eyes adjust really quickly, you're able to see. In the winter, when it's cold, it's starting to get dark, and you're riding at night, shadows just are a little bit different. So that's why lighting up the trail and lighting up your vision as much as possible helps you see a little bit better. Just like riding in winter conditions, start off a little bit slow, take it easy, kind of get a feel for it, and you'll be shredded in no time. And it really is a really cool, fun experience, especially in the winter. I recommend trying some night riding.
Do you have any recommendations on what bike or what pressure or what tires to ride with?
So that's a really good question. This is actually a plus tire bike, so it's a little bit wider. It's a 27 by 2.8 inch tire. Something like this is going to work a little bit better than the typical skinnier mountain bike tires, especially when you get the snow, and that's when it really shows. A lot of folks are riding fat tire bikes now, so they're in that kind of 4 to 5 inch or even bigger range. And when snow gets really deep, those are fantastic. It's essentially snowshoes for your bike, so it gets you to float on top of the snow as opposed to sinking down into the snow. That's a really good question. As far as tread goes, a more aggressive tread in conditions like this, when we are open, is going to give you a little bit more traction, but you are going to get a little bit more mud on your bike, so an aggressive tread that with widely spaced knobs, so the mud can clear out and still give you traction, is a really good choice. It's a great question. I could do a show just about tires.
And then we'll be back next week talking about what clothing to wear when it's cold outside and you want to go on a ride.
That's right. So Jordan and I have been geeking out about our winter riding gear, getting geared up, and choosing, what is the right thing to wear to keep you warm in all sorts of winter riding conditions. That's all I have for you folks. Hope that we can see you out here at MoMBA sometime. It really is a cool experience to ride in the winter, and I hope we get enough snow to get a really good base down where we can do a lot of riding out here this year.